All right, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great event on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience, so if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for our speaker, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use the question and answer tab on your interface and submit your questions, and we will try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. We also have 2 polling questions throughout the presentation, so hopefully we can get you all engaged with those. And speaking of engagement, we have a very interactive chat feature, which we'll be monitoring throughout. So please feel free to chat us your questions, comments, suggestions, whatever you want to share with us, please do send it on over. We'll keep an eye on it, and we might even chat you back. And then also at the end of today's webinar, we are doing a drawing for 4 $100 Amazon gift cards just in time for the holidays. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is protecting and migrating Red Hat OpenShift container-based applications. Our speaker today is Ben Morrison, who is a solutions architect over at Trilio. Ben, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited about this webinar.
Thank you, Charlene. It's great to be here today. Thank you for having us.
You bet, you bet. Well, I know you've got a great presentation on tap and a demo. So I am going to take myself off camera, put myself on mute. I'll come back around when we get to the first polling question, and I'll push it out for you then.
Okay. Sounds good. I can take it from here. So as Charlene said, my name is Ben Morrison. I'm a solutions architect here at Trilio. I'm located in San Francisco, but I cover all of North America and Latin America, actually, for Trulia Vault for Kubernetes. I'd like to keep this webinar, very interactive. We'll have a few polling questions. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in that Q&A, and we'll get them answered either throughout the presentation or at the end. Oh, whoops. So Ben Morrison here, and we also want to thank Red Hat for co-sponsoring this event as well. This is a Trulia Vault and Red Hat joint sponsored event. So first and foremost, we're going to talk a little bit about the key challenges of Kubernetes and the themes that we see in Kubernetes users today. So here we see 2 different polls that were taken. First one on the left was taken in 2017, and on the right was taken actually in 2020. And so when CNCF actually asked Kubernetes users back in 2017 what the key challenges or top challenges were that they felt about their Kubernetes clusters and applications running on those clusters, number 1, of course, was security, which is something that we'll touch on a bit today. Second was networking, and third was storage. And storage was specifically pertaining towards those backups and maintaining the storage of application consistency and maintaining that data of those applications on those Kubernetes clusters. So now fast forward a bit, here is CNCF survey from 2020 that was taken asking about users of Kubernetes and how many are running stateful applications on their Kubernetes clusters. And so we had yes to 55% of people said that they were running stateful applications. No was 22%, and then 23% there you can see were either evaluating or they were planning to use stateful applications on their clusters within the next 12 months. And so with that, I'll be asking you similar polls throughout here, but this just sets the stage of how Kubernetes has progressed the past couple of days. We anticipate that with the 2021 CNCF survey, that there will be a much higher number, much higher percentage in that yes in production column. And that's one of the topics we're going to cover today, is how to protect those stateful applications on your OCP clusters. So a little bit on Red Hat OpenShift and Trilio's partnership with them as well. So Red Hat OpenShift is the only certified and native ISV platform for Red Hat, or excuse me, Trilio is the only certified and native ISV platform for Red Hat. And so we actually support Red Hat OpenShift Container Platform, Red Hat OpenShift Data Foundation, Red Hat OpenStack. We have Trulia Vault for OpenStack that helps you protect your data on OpenStack. And then also we have Red Hat Virtualization, which allows you to protect all of your data and those VMs on Rev as well as a certification also in IBM Cloud Pak for data, data systems, multi-cloud management, and applications. So as you can see, Trilio and Red Hat and IBM have a close partnership and have always had a close partnership. And so Trilio has historically always helped Red Hat with all of their products when it comes to protecting that application and data, recovering applications and data in that IT and backup administrator use case, and then also managing any of those backups and restores as well. Now getting into Trulia Vault for Kubernetes and a bit of our side of the story. So as the world has shifted from VMs to Kubernetes and container orchestration technology, our founders found that the transition when it comes to backup, you could no longer use these traditional data protection technologies such as VM backups when it comes to Kubernetes. You're essentially siloing your backups themselves with these monolithic applications. They're not cloud native, these traditional data protection technologies, and so they rarely have much of a changing footprint, and they're only focused on storage and volume data. They're not focused on any of the metadata, and they're not focused on the orchestration features and advantages of Kubernetes themselves. So with that, we as a team developed Trulia Vault for Kubernetes. The next step, the next evolution in data protection for those cloud native applications. And so you'll find some themes here with TVK when it comes to protecting Kubernetes workloads, is that we are much more modular. It's much more microservices focused, utilizing some of those jobs oriented with Kubernetes themselves. It's highly scalable, just like Kubernetes. Once you have Trilio on one of your clusters, it scales alongside with you as that cluster grows. It's also very highly automated with our API-driven architecture. We actually integrate directly into that Kubernetes API, which we'll talk a bit about more. And we're also very policy-driven and multi-tenancy driven. And so here, getting back to those themes of challenges with Kubernetes, this was one that we knew we could tackle and we've successfully tackled when it comes to having a cloud native backup solution for backing up those cloud native applications. So here are the 6 main topics we'll go over today when it comes to Trulia Vault for Kubernetes. First and foremost, in that top left, you can see application-centric is one of our key design features. So with TVK, you can, if you choose, back up an entire cluster, meaning the etcd and all the infrastructure of your cluster. Or as we recommend it in the route we focus on, you can just back up your applications and the workloads themselves. Now, the reason why we as an organization have decided to focus on this application-centric backup is because Kubernetes is very easy to spin up new clusters, right? If an issue happens at the infrastructure level with an OCP cluster, it's extremely easy to spin up a new one within 30 minutes or less. I do it all the time, and it's very, very convenient. And so we wanted to focus on backing up the data and metadata of your applications and workloads sitting on those clusters. So when you have a new cluster pulled up, when you have a backup cluster, or when you're migrating workloads to a new cluster, you can focus on just capturing all of those objects and then restoring them into a new cluster. How do you back up, or how do you select all of this data and metadata in Kubernetes objects? Well, with Trilio, you can back up via Helm chart simply by selecting a Helm chart you use to deploy that workload, by selecting an operator that you choose to deploy that workload, or you can select a individual label or multiple labels or an entire namespace if you wish to. So as you'll find throughout this presentation, Trilio lets you get very, very granular and very customized when it comes to your backups. So this is the start of that customization here. We're native to Kubernetes and OpenShift, so we're actually packaged as an operator, and then we deploy CRDs directly into that Kubernetes API. So you can actually use commands like kubectl get backups, kubectl get restores, or OC get backups, OC get restores, and through those commands you can interact with your backups and restores. This is useful for two reasons. One, it means you don't have to manage a whole new CLI. You can just simply use that OC CLI you've been using before to interact with TVK CRDs. But it also means that you have one less API to deal with. Trilio is native to that Kubernetes API, right? So any other third-party tools that you want to use, as long as they can connect and talk to the Kubernetes API, they can talk to Trilio. We have enterprise class, and we're an enterprise class solution, and we have ecosystem tooling compatibility. For that enterprise class piece, we have a lot of features like hooks, restore transforms, policies, which we'll dive into as we continue on here. And for that ecosystem tooling, we're easily compatible with those third-party tools, like I just mentioned, right? So Prometheus, Grafana, Fluentd is another one that's very commonly used with Trilio for event streaming, logging, and dashboard monitoring. We're very easy to try and install. You can download a free trial of TVK onto your OCP cluster right through the OpenShift operator hub. And you can do a free trial for however big a cluster for 30 days. You could do a free basic edition for a cluster for an infinite amount of time, as long as you wish, as long as that cluster is 10 nodes or less, or is 20 CPUs or less. So whichever one comes first, 10 nodes or 20 CPUs. But then if you want to move up to that enterprise edition, you can get an enterprise edition licensing with us, which is, of course, for any size of cluster and however many clusters you wish to have Trilio installed onto. And that also comes with that premium support, 24/7, 365 premium support. We have a management console, which we'll show a bit today in a demo. And this is a very intuitive, click-driven workflows that you can use. Basically, excuse me, basically anything you can do in the CLI, you can do in this UI plus more. We have features like application monitoring and application discovery as well, which we'll show a bit. And then for infrastructure compatibility and certifications, we are compatible with any storage out there with CSI snapshotting capabilities. So we are storage agnostic as long as it has that snapshotting feature, which most storage in my experience does at this point, including all of OpenShift storage for OpenShift Data Foundation. Then you can also use NFS or S3 for storing your backups onto as a target. I'll also mention that in the next couple months, we're coming out with a new release that also allows you to use blob storage for storing your backups as well. Of course, we're available on any cloud out there, private, public, hybrid cloud, air-gapped environments as well, which is one we'll talk about. And then we also have a variety of certifications here. Trilio is compatible and able to be run on any CNCF certified distribution. We just have made a habit of wanting to get as many certifications from each of those distributions as possible to essentially validate and confirm our security and our infrastructure and our application aligns with each of these distributions as well. So Red Hat was actually the first distribution we had certified with, along with IBM Cloud Pak was not far behind as well. And so we'll talk today, of course, about some of the benefits of using Trilio with OpenShift. Remember too, if there's any clarifying questions or anything, go ahead and drop that in the chat. I know Charlene will interrupt me if need be. And I can see in the chat already, we've got some people from Poland, from Canada, from Idaho. It looks amazing. Have people from all over the place. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. So now just to paint the picture one more time, what Trilio does at its core is if you have a Kubernetes cluster 1 and you have all of these pods, PVs, secrets, config maps, etc. on that Kubernetes cluster 1, you can install Trilio onto your cluster as well. Trilio can back up all of those objects, all that data and metadata, store it onto your NFS or S3 target, restore it into that same cluster, same namespace, or same cluster, different namespace. Or you can also, of course, restore all of those workloads into an entirely different cluster. I'll also note here that if we say theoretically cluster 1 is maybe an upstream cluster and then cluster 2 is OCP, you can migrate applications and workloads across different distributions, any different distributions. You can migrate workloads across, again, as long as they're CNCF certified. So especially if you are using multi-cloud, or maybe you're using one distribution, now you're moving to OCP, you can use Trilio to move those workloads seamlessly across those different clusters. So it looks like we have our first polling question here. I know it'll be listed in that polls tab that you see in front of you. And
Yep.
so we have, do you run stateful applications within Kubernetes? Just like that, similar to that poll we had before. Yes, in production. Yes, we're evaluating. Plan to the next 6 months, or no, we're only doing stateless applications at this time.
Yeah, so the poll is open. Please go ahead and make your selection. And while we are waiting for folks to do that, I'm actually going to show the results as in real time so we can see it. That's pretty cool. This is a new feature, folks, and so we're very excited to be test driving it for the first time. But while we are waiting for everybody to make their response, to make their choice, just a quick reminder that today's event is being recorded. So if you miss any or all of it, you will have the opportunity to access it later on demand. We are going to be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand after today's event. So keep an eye out for that. Very helpful if you enjoy what you hear and you want to listen to it again, for sure. So Ben, when you are comfortable, just let me know when you want me to shut down the poll, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. I think we're about good. I don't see it moving anymore here. Hopefully everyone's gotten their answers in.
Okay. All right. I'll give everybody 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Closing the poll out now. You could see the responses. The majority of folks actually said that they are using stateless only. So that's 31%. But we also had an even number of folks who said that they do plan to run stateful applications within Kubernetes within the next 6 months. So, and then 25% are still are evaluating. So it looks like the adoption is kind of gradual, but it's happening.
That sounds about right with what we see as well. Some people are ahead of the curve and have those stateful applications already running, but the majority are evaluating. They plan to in the next 6 months, and so that's a good note for that backup and recovery piece. Being really a day 0 or day 1, essentially a day 1 operation. Once you have those stateful applications running on your cluster, you want to evaluate the criticality of that data and the importance of backing it up. And so the next step you usually want to do is some sort of way to back up that data. So makes sense to me. Hopefully we'll see. Best of luck to everyone evaluating and setting things up in the next 6 months. Hopefully we see more of people in that yes column in production in 6 months from now.
All right.
Okay. So we'll keep going on here if you can keep seeing my screen. So for packaging and accessibility, how to get access to TVK, you can install us using an upstream operator using Helm v2 or Helm v3. But if you're an OCP user, like I'm sure you are, you might be if you're on this webinar today, you can actually go right into the operator hub and deploy TVK and all of its CRDs right from OpenShift. And when you deploy right from OpenShift and in the operator hub, the Trilio operator is managed by the operator lifecycle manager. So this means that seamless upgrades occur and maintenance essentially of that operator you're able to see and have as well. And that gets us into some of the other advantages of Trulia Vault and Red Hat integrated together. So when it comes to OpenShift container platform, you can deploy using the operator hub, as I just mentioned, that you can see that the operator hub and the OLM fully manages, has full management capabilities of the OCP dynamics. And you also have full capability of using OCP YAMLs to organize your backups and resources as well. We'll see a little bit more about how you can use the OCP dashboard, excuse me, to essentially manage all those backups and restores. You don't even have to use the Trilio management console if you don't want to. You can do it all right through OCP. I'll also make one more note here that with our newest release and installing the operator through the operator hub, Red Hat now automatically sets up the UI for you. So it's truly a one-click install. You truly install this application and the UI and everything is just set up and ready to go. You can even log in with your OCP credentials as soon as it's installed without any maintenance or fuss on your end. And so I think if you're an OCP user, you'll find that getting started with Trilio is very, very easy. For OpenShift Data Foundation, as we said, we're certified with them as well. You have out-of-the-box integration via CSI with Trilio as well. As soon as it's installed, it'll know to use ODF and will use it for its snapshotting technology. Leveraging that snapshotting, like I mentioned, and then no additional configuration really required at all, as long as that CSI driver ODF is the default storage class. That's the only requirement there. So now we'll continue on. The TVK architecture is the next piece we'll go over here. And so the first control plane of the TVK architecture simply manages all those CRDs, provides services to the web UI, the scheduling, the APIs, all that backend management of your backups and restores. The second plane is the metadata plane, and this is where Trilio backs up all that metadata with the MetaMover pod. All that metadata would be the deployment, secrets, config maps, etc. This is not a comprehensive list. Any metadata out there, Trilio can capture. It then captures that data in JSON format and then stores it onto your NFS or S3 target. And then for the data plane, that final third plane of the architecture, this is where really the Trilio magic kind of happens here. The data mover pods are responsible for capturing the persistent volume data that you have for your stateful applications on your cluster. And there's two things I want to point out about this data capture. One is the calculates incremental changes. So let's say theoretically or hypothetically, we're going to do a backup of an application on our OCP cluster once a day. So day one, we're going to do a full backup, of course, of the entire application, all the metadata and all the data in that persistent volume. On day two, we can do an incremental backup. So Trilio will compare the data from day one and the data from day two, look at any changes that have occurred between those 2 days, and then only back up the changes in data that have occurred, essentially updating the backup itself in that S3 target. And so this is an advantage for a variety of reasons. It's less throughput on your network for connecting to that S3 target. It consumes less resources on your cluster and on your system itself. It means that there's no duplication of data within your storage of your S3 or NFS, which means lower costs for you and no need for a deduplication tool. So a variety of advantages you can see from this incremental backup. And then secondly, the QCOW2 format is another one. So we as an organization chose not to use a proprietary file format for our backups. So when we back up your persistent volume data, we do so in QCOW2 because it is a Linux industry standard. Not only is it take up minimal storage in the S3 or NFS, and not only is it easy to retrieve in the instance of a restore to minimize that RTO, but it's also non-proprietary. And so you won't have any vendor lock-in. And if you wish to use another tool, like maybe a malware scanner to interact with that QCOW2 file, you can do whatever you wish with that file and interact with it how you wish. I'll note here when it comes to looking at other solutions in the backup and restore space, all other solutions out there that I'm aware of use proprietary file formats. They have some sort of lock-in, so if you stop using their tool, you'll no longer have access to that file or that backup itself. So just something to keep in mind when looking at different backup and recovery solutions out there. Next, here we have our custom resource definitions. As I mentioned, these are deployed right into that Kubernetes API. These are the main resource definitions we have. So first off, we have that target NFS or S3, as I mentioned before, which is where those backups are stored to. Next, we have our policies, which lets you design the frequency of your backups and also your backup retention. So essentially, if you only want to keep 5 backups at the end of every month and you did a backup every day that month, you can tell Trilio to make this retention policy and clean up any older backups except the 5 most recent to kind of reduce clutter and again, reduce any storage and storage costs. You also have the hook CRD, which is those pre and post scripts for before and after a backup occurs. And these are especially important for database quiescing and application consistency. This is what allows us to be compatible with essentially any containerized Kubernetes database out there, because you can use hooks and scripts to have that application consistency and help get your databases set up with Trilio. Next, you have your backup plan, which is what target policy and hook fall into. You can think of this as your blueprint for your backup. It's essentially the plan, the backup plan for how you're going to go about your backup. And this is also where you select that Helm operator label or entire namespace. We then have the operational CRD of backup, choosing your full or incremental if you want to do a manual backup. Restore, choosing the backup you want to restore, the cluster you want to restore it into, and then the namespace of that cluster you want to restore it into. And then finally, the application sitting on the cluster itself. I'm going to check the chat here. It looks like we still have no questions or anything, which is fine. So we'll continue on. Don't forget to feel free to ask anything if you want any clarifications. So getting into this namespace custom label Helm and operator one more time here, you can see namespaces labeled namespaces is over the top of all three of the others because you can select an entire namespace to back up, but then you can also get very granular on excluding certain labels. You can include certain Helm charts if you wish to also back up the Helm charts, and you can include certain operators to actually back up the operators themselves. For custom labels, if you're getting a more granular level, you can simply select a label, and then Trilio will go through the whole cluster and find any objects associated with that label and back them up. Pretty self-explanatory on that one. You can also choose multiple labels at once if you wish. For Helm charts, you simply select a Helm chart used to deploy a certain application. And when you select that Helm chart, not only is the data and metadata all backed up, but also all revisions of the Helm chart itself. And then when you restore that backup, the Helm chart again is deployed in your new cluster or namespace. Again, making sure that that application is running and functions exactly as it was before. And then lastly, similar to Helm charts, operators, Trilio again goes through, backs up all the data and metadata associated with an application deployed by a certain operator when you select that operator. But we also back up any resources of that operator or any backup. We also back up any operator custom resources created by the user. So you know that when your restore occurs, that operator is again deployed and functioning just as it did before in a previous point in time.
Hey, Ben, I got a question for you. Question came in from Jeremy.
Yep.
He
Sounds
asks
good.
if data is encrypted at rest, I assume the incremental backups will not be able to deduplicate.
So data is encrypted at rest and encrypted in transit now. The exact encryption protocols slip my mind right now, but those are in our documentation if you wish to dig into those more. And I can follow up as well at the end of this. And in terms of incremental backups, so incremental backups are already deduplicated. At their nature, they're only backing up any changes in data that have occurred, which means any already existing data is not backed up again. So with incremental backups, they're already deduplicated, so there's no need for any deduplication software on that end. Thank you for the question too, Jeremy. I really appreciate it. So getting into our next poll here, we're gonna go ahead and kick that one off and see what everyone has to say. So do you use, what do you use to manage applications within Kubernetes? So talking about how you deploy those applications and workloads. Are you mostly a Helm chart user, operator user? Do you mostly manage those applications at the namespace level or the labels level?
All right. Yeah, the polling question should be up on your screen now. Go ahead and make your choice. And again, while we are waiting for the audience to do that, just a quick reminder that go ahead and get your questions in for Ben. If you've got one, please don't wait until we get to the question and answer period. As we just showed, we're open to doing questions at any time during the presentation. So please go ahead and get it on in. You don't have to wait, although we'll take questions at any time, even during the question and answer period. Also, we are going to be doing a drawing at the end of the webinar for 4 $100 Amazon gift cards. So please do stick around for that as well, because you got to be in it to win it, folks. All right, Ben, I'm going to give the audience, say, about 10 seconds more to make their choice, and then we'll take a look at the results. But here are the results so far. Throwing it up there for you. Yeah, let's give it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Those are the results there. So it looks like again, the question was, what do you use to manage applications within Kubernetes? Looks like the majority of folks are using namespaces, and then followed closely by Helm, and then labels, and only 6% are using operator. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think that again makes sense based on at least what I've seen in my experience. I think Helm chart is a very popular way to deploy applications, so that's a common one that people use. Operator a little less so, but it's still available, and some out there definitely do use operators. I know namespaces in terms of just simple management of applications. People do a lot of projects at the namespace level or have roles and permissions based on all their multi-tenant users at that namespace level. So it definitely makes sense to me. And labels an interesting one too. Labels a little higher than I thought it would be, but that's good to know. Everyone uses labels, but in terms of that main management piece, I feel like I usually hear Helm chart and namespaces. So thank you again for everyone voting. Okay, so a little more information about Trulia Vault for Kubernetes and some of our design criteria that we have here. These 5 main design pillars. So Trilio actually does not even require admin access for the cluster or a namespace in order to do those backups and restores. So with that multi-tenancy, that RBAC, like I mentioned before, you can have separate accounts and you don't have to have admin access to have whatever permissions you need. You simply make cluster role bindings and define your RBAC that way, essentially. We have security context constraints, if I can talk today. So Trilio leverages those existing default SCCs, so it doesn't create new SCCs, just to be aware of that. And essentially keeping your organization exactly as your SCCs are and not needing to create any new ones. Service accounts, Trilio creates its own service accounts and does not leverage those default service accounts, something to be aware of, and those service accounts can be created or deleted all during runtime. For permissions and capabilities, you can set your own permissions and capabilities, and there's also some documentation on the details on how to do that. And then lastly, the security product definitions are also provided in the documentation as well. That piece that I mentioned about encryption at rest and at rest and in transit, that's all detailed in the documentation as well. Here's a little bit on our management console. We'll be able to see this a bit during our demo too. So I'll go through this quickly, but essentially we have application discovery, allows you to see what applications or even what objects or labels are successfully backed up and which ones are unprotected. We have some intuitive management we try to keep within the UI, so you can see the real-time backup and restore summaries across your different clusters. We allow multi-cluster management as well. We have simple workflows for especially building disaster recovery plans will be a big one that we'll see in our demo today. And we have the ability, you have the ability to migrate applications across different clusters right within the same pane of glass. So you have that multi-cluster management capability, which you'll see. And then lastly, you can also have Valero backup visibility and monitoring. So we know a lot of people, when they start off with backup and recovery for their stateful applications, they first use Valero because it's the open source solution out there that everyone's familiar with. And so once users are ready for that more mature enterprise grade solution, when it comes to backup and restore and migrate over to Trulia Vault for Kubernetes, we want to make that as seamless and easy as possible. And so right through the TVK UI, you can actually see your you can see your Valero backups and restores, which you might have previously taken. Our last slide here, and then we can be done with the PowerPoints and off to a demo. Just summarizing everything I've gone through today. Again, TVK integrates with that upstream Kubernetes API, which means that any CNCF certified distribution we are compatible with, and you can run Trilio on. Storage, we're storage agnostic, just a CSI driver with snapshotting functionality is the only thing required. And if you use any Red Hat storage, you can rest assured that you're good there. You'll have that snapshotting capability. For targets, you can do anything that's S3 compatible or NFS for storing those backups onto those QCOW2s. QCOW2 files you can store to. And I'll also note, as I think I mentioned before, blob storage is another one we're going to be coming out with in a release in the next couple months. For ecosystem tooling, Grafana, Prometheus, Fluentd is another one. This is not a comprehensive list by any means. Any of those third-party tools out there that interact directly with the Kubernetes API, you can use to interact with Trilio. So you can use some of your existing tools that you already have to help you with managing and working with Trilio. For databases, this is, again, not a comprehensive list of our compatibility, but it's actually a list of the databases that we already have documentation for when it comes to hooks and backup plans. So because of those hooks, essentially, I've never had an issue with backing up a database. I've never seen a database not be able to be backed up by Trilio as long as it's on a CNCF certified cluster. And so this is because of those hooks that you can use to quiesce those databases and have application consistency. So this is just a list of the documentation we have on each of these databases. And then lastly, of course, any cloud out there, you can run Trilio on any public cloud as well as on-prem, private, or hybrid clouds as well. So with that, I think we will switch over to the demo itself. Yep, we're going to do a demo of recovering applications across OCP clusters. So I'm going to go ahead and I grabbed a recording of this, and I'm going to talk through this demo as we go through it. So here I am in the OCP Operator Hub. First, I'm just going to show the certified Trulia Vault for Kubernetes Operator and how you can install it right here in the OCP UI. You can see that basic install, seamless upgrades, and full lifecycle management. Of course, here it says uninstall because it's already installed in this cluster, but it would say installed there. And then once Trilio is installed on your cluster, you can continue to manage it here in OCP. So you can see the targets that you've set up. You can see policies that you've set up in Trilio, all those CRDs I just talked about. You're going to see these same CRDs later on in the TVK management console as well. But just to show you here in OCP, you can create new ones. You can manage them all through here as well if you wish to take that route. All the way into cluster backup plan, cluster backups, and cluster restores. Now here we're going to show pods we have running in this WordPress demo namespace. These are the pods that we have set up in an existing namespace on our first cluster. So we have some deployments, all of which have been deployed a few days prior. I believe, no stateful sets in this application and no config maps, but you can see those deployments. And then I know there's some services as well for this application. Yep. So we have some WordPress services using a MySQL database. And so this is OCP GCP cluster 4. And then we have our second one, cluster 5, OCP GCP cluster 5. This is the cluster we're going to be restoring into. So now we're taking a look at demo restore. This namespace, no WordPress, nothing in here, just target browser. That's some infrastructure for a Trilio. When you configure a target, it deploys a target pod onto your namespace. But besides that, no WordPress. So by the end of this demo, we'll see a restored WordPress in that demo restore namespace. Here's just the application itself. Trilio on OCP demo showing these edits and everything. And now we'll move into the actual TVK UI. So here I'm going to log in first. You can log in using a kubeconfig file if you want, or you can log in with OpenShift credentials. As you can see there's also LDAP and GitHub if you want to use any of those OIDC providers as well. Completely up to you. But OCP is automatically configured once you install Trilio. Here I have one namespace that is successfully backed up, which I can tell because of the green. I can see the latest backup was successful. It's that WordPress application we just looked at. And so I'm just going to see some of the details of that backup plan here. Target I'm using, KubeCon Demo S3 target. I can choose to add in some schedules if I want. I'm not going to for now, but just showing that this drop down, I can add in full backup and incremental backup schedules, as well as a retention policy here as well. And you can see the hooks and encryption secret at the top as well. I can add in. I can select certain resources if I wish, but I'm not going to worry about that. Instead, I'm just going to go ahead and create this backup using my WordPress namespace backup plan OCP. Here we have TVK OCP WordPress demo 1. And I can choose if I want to make it a full or incremental backup, but I'm just going to stick with full for this one. Okay, and that backup is kicked off. We're going to see a status log, and while we wait on that, we'll continue to look around at the platform and see some different features you can do. That summary is already kicked off, so I have visibility of what's available and what's in progress. If anything fails on the backup or restore end, I can see those details to figure out what needs to be fixed and get everything up and running as quickly as possible. And so now I was at the namespace level view before, but now I'm looking at the application level view. So here I can see actually each individual object if I wish. I mentioned how I can see labels, helmet operator, but I can also get down to the object level and see the actual backup plans as well. Here's just an example of a cockroach DB application and a Helm chart that was there. So you can see here, that was an application that was backed up via Helm chart. Although we won't be restoring that one today. We're going to focus on the WordPress. And here in that second cluster, SAOCP GCP5, you can see demo restore namespace. There were no labels for WordPress. And here in the objects, you can see some infrastructure objects, but no WordPress objects listed here. Just proving again that the WordPress application does not exist in that demo restore namespace. Again, you see here all of the, back to that namespace view. And if I wanted to add another cluster, like I did for the second OCP cluster, I just add the name, URL, kubeconfig file, and you're ready to go. For OCP, actually, when you add it in as well, you can just log in with those OCP credentials. There's that Valero tab I mentioned, that Valero integration, and then also we're in the resource management tab now. Organized by namespace, we can go down to WordPress demo namespace where that WordPress application is running. We can see the backup plan right here we just talked about. We can see the some hook examples if we wish, just pre and post command examples, that retention policy I mentioned, and that scheduling policy as well. Can easily create a new scheduling policy for hourly, monthly, daily. Actually, you can get down to the minute if you wish on scheduling backups. And you can also see the target we're using, that KubeCon demo S3 target and AWS S3 targets, where that backup is stored to. You can do object locking on these targets if you wish, although this one we do not have object locking. And you can also do something called browsing or target browsing. So in this target browser, what you can see here is actually all the backup plans associated with all these different clusters, GKE, OCP, RKE. So these are all backups from different clusters that I'm looking at. And so theoretically, I can select one of these backup plans in this target and restore them into my current cluster, the one I'm in now. But I'm not going to do that with any of the other ones. I'm going to instead do an OCP to OCP restore here soon. So now it looks like that backup was completed. We now have 2 out of 2. You can see demo 1. This is the backup we just did. We can take a look at that status log. Looks like it was only about 4.5 minutes to complete. Did the metadata snapshot, data snapshot, upload, and the metadata upload. So that one is all good to go. We can also see at a very granular level each piece of metadata that was actually backed up as well, storage classes, everything. So you can get very, very granular if you wish to. With the Trilio management console, we try to keep it as simple as possible, but also allow you to deep dive if you wish. So here then, just again showing that WordPress demo. I'm actually going to delete these deployments now to kind of simulate an outage is what we're going to do here. So deleting these 2 deployments obviously is going to cause my application to crash, and I'm going to lose data if I'm deleting my MySQL deployment. And so we'll see here that now this web access no longer works. I'm not connected to my application. Something has just happened. A disaster has occurred, and I can no longer access my data itself. So at this point now, I already have that backup. I have 2 backups actually that were taken for my primary cluster, and now I'm going to that second cluster, and I'm going to do a disaster recovery plan. So I'm going to do just a demo restore disaster recovery plan name, select that KubeCon demo S3, as I mentioned before. Again, you can see backups from a bunch of different clusters, but this is the backup that we used or the backup plan that we used just now to do our backup. WordPress NS demo OCP. So now all we're doing here is it's taking us to essentially a restore screen. I can select in this secondary cluster, I want to restore into that demo restore namespace, which we showed before was empty, had no WordPress applications. I'm selecting some flags just to make sure I'm skipping any objects that might already exist. So there's no duplicates of any objects. If I want to, I could do transforms to actually change the storage class that this application uses before it's even restored. This is essentially how you can do those restores across different distributions. But for today, I won't need to do any of those transforms. Same thing with exclusions. I can exclude certain resources if I want, but today I won't. And same thing with the hooks. I actually won't need any hooks today, but I can add them right here if I wish to. Now we're going to go ahead and execute that restore, get it kicked off. And now I believe at this point, we're going to wait here for a couple minutes for this restore to occur. I want to let this thing, I want you to be able to see this progress, this restore actually progressing. And it's only going to take, I think, about 4 minutes here. But while we wait, I can go ahead and answer any other questions that might be in that Q&A. So do we have any other questions at this point that we could cover while we wait just a few minutes here?
We do have one or two more questions here. Here's one for you. What install scopes does Trulia Vault support?
Okay, good question. So, so as I mentioned before, Trilio can be installed with that Helm chart or through the operator hub with OCP. But when it comes to install scopes, you can install it at the cluster level or an actual namespace level if you want to only deploy at the namespace level. We did this because we know some projects in multi-tenancy are very strict to the actual namespaces that users can use. So answer to that question is cluster level or namespace level.
All right, great. Guys, there is plenty of time for questions to be asked. So please, if you've got one, go ahead and send it on in. We're going to just kind of keep rolling until the end of the webinar. So here's another one for you. If you want it, do you want another question now, Ben?
Yep, we can go for it.
Okay. All right, what database has Trilio tested and validated application hooks on?
Great question. So that last slide, that compatibility slide of all of our databases, those are all the databases that we have hooks on and have tested on. Actually, we've tested on more than just those databases, but those are all the ones that we have documentation on. And so if any of those databases stuck out to you as being one that you use, we already have documentation to get you started easily with that one.
All right, great. We've just got one in from Sujit who asks, apart from S3, what other target object stores are supported for storing cluster backups?
Great question. So you can also use NFS if you wish. We wanted to make our backups NFS compatible because we know this might be a technology that a lot of people use since it's a bit more legacy than S3. And on top of that, blob storage as well will be coming out soon. It's not available today, but in our newest release coming out, you'll be able to use any sort of blob storage as well. And that'll be, you can expect early next year, essentially, for that release to occur.
All right, he's got a follow-up question. Is Trilio Vault compatible with the Kafka ecosystem?
Yep, and the answer to that is yes, we are compatible with the Kafka ecosystem.
All right, great. Excellent. Let's see, I think I have one more question in here. So I do encourage folks to go ahead and submit any questions if you have one. Please feel free. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Here is another one here. Why is Trilio different than other solutions out there? What a broad question, but I'm sure you'll be able to answer it.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like our restore just got finished up, actually. But the easy answer to that would be, here, let me quickly pause just to answer that question while we have it. The easy answer to that would be that agnostic piece and the non-proprietary piece. You know, we really try to be the Switzerland of the Kubernetes world in terms of being agnostic. And I know that some backup solutions, if they're tied to a certain storage provider, can often be biased when it comes to the storage that you're allowed to use. A lot of those other solutions out there also have proprietary file format, so they have a bit of lock-in. And so we have that non-proprietary piece. And then lastly, I would also say the ransomware piece is a big one. We've taken a lot of strides and effort to follow the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is an internationally recognized framework for best practices in combating malware and ransomware. In the past year or so, we've really made some impressive improvements, or we already had a good foundation, but impressive results in terms of going above and beyond, of ensuring that users of Trilio feel confident that their backups are secure and safe in the event of some ransomware attack or malware attack happening. So I think those would be the main differentiators, I would say. One other one would also be the Kubernetes API, because we integrate directly in the Kubernetes API, makes it very easy to automate Trilio and work with Trilio because you have one less API to worry about. So with that, thank you for all the questions. I know we don't have too much time left, so we'll keep going here. We can see that our disaster recovery restore worked. It was successful. We can see a quick summary. And again, that metadata that we saw before in our backup. Same sort of thing. We can see the exact metadata that was restored. Now we're in our OCP GCP 5 cluster. Remember that secondary cluster? We're in our demo restore namespace. Remember, this had no WordPress pods in it before, and now you can see just a few seconds ago a WordPress pod and a WordPress MySQL pod was deployed. Here are the deployments themselves. And then we also know there's some services, right? So we have the services as well for our WordPress application. And now the key here, the last step, is because we have a new cluster and new service, there's going to be a new external IP to access the UI of WordPress itself. So I'm quickly just going to go into GCP, where my DNS is located. Whatever DNS you use is fine. And I'm going to update that IP address to the new IP address of my new service on my new cluster, my new restored cluster. And so now the WordPress application that was crashed before is now up and running in minimal time. So you won't have that long outage, and you can see exactly as it was before. Same title, same description, so same data of your WordPress application, now on an entirely new cluster. So with that, I'll go ahead and end my demo. I know we have a few more minutes here, so just talking about use cases. Trilio, of course, first and foremost, is used for a backup and recovery use case. We just saw an example of that. You can schedule your backups as frequently as you want to do those on-demand backups. Disaster recovery, we also just saw a great use case for Trilio as well. When it comes to outages or malware or ransomware or anything, you can use our disaster recovery planning tool to make sure you're ready and can restore an application on a secondary cluster whenever you need. Governance and compliance should be another use case. Many industries out there, I know financial services and telecom are two big ones when it comes to governance and compliance. And so oftentimes you will be required with a B2C application to have protection of consumers' data. And so make sure you're checking your governance and compliance. And if you need a enterprise grade solution, Trilio is one of the solutions that can satisfy that need. Ransomware protection and recoverability, just talked a bit about this. I encourage you, if you are interested in learning more about our stance against ransomware and the precautions and measures we've taken against ransomware, we have a lot of documentation on that as well on our website. And you can reach out to anyone really on the Trilio team, and they'll probably put you in contact with me, and you and I can have more of a contact and discussion about ransomware. And then lastly, migration is a big one as well. When thinking about Kubernetes, it's a fast-growing technology, right? And so there's always new distributions coming out. There's always new versions of those distributions coming out. And so as you migrate applications to new clusters or upgrade clusters, make sure you're backing up your data before you do so. And you can even use Trilio to migrate applications and your data from one distribution to another if you find yourself in that multi-cloud scenario that you want to be in, or if you want to migrate from one distribution to another. And with that, I have no more comments. I want to say thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you, DevOps, for hosting us here at this webinar. And thank you to Red Hat for co-sponsoring this presentation with us today. I think you'll have access to these slides at the end of the webinar here, and you can find these links to watch a demo, test drive some scenarios, or even download a free trial if you wish. And visit us at trilio.io.
All right. All right. Great. Thanks, Ben. What a great presentation. And I'm a big fan of the demos. I love that stuff. So thank you very much for showing that as well. Just a quick reminder to the audience that once again, today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. We are going to be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand following today's event. And the webinar is also going to be living on the DevOps.com website, so you can go look for it there. Just go to DevOps.com/webinars and look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. All right, real quick, let's go ahead and do that Amazon gift card drawing. As I said, we have 4 $100 Amazon gift cards. So without further ado, today's winners are Kevin D. Congratulations, Kevin. Our second winner today is Edgar V. Congratulations, Edgar. Our third winner today is Alicia C. Congratulations, Alicia. And our fourth winner today is Simon M. Congratulations, Simon. We'll be following up with all 4 of you via email to get your Amazon gift card over to you. So please check your inbox. And if you don't see it there, please check your spam folder. Ben, again, thank you so much for a great presentation. Always good stuff. And I do appreciate your spending an hour with us and sharing your expertise. Good stuff.
Thank you so much, Charlene. Yep, I appreciate it as well.
You bet. I also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.